Good morning. Go ahead and take a seat if you haven't already done so. I don't know if you notice how many of those songs had rain, storm, clouds. Man, we really can pick them, Jan. Good job with that. And if you're here this Sunday in person, not knocking the online folks, but you really want to be here apparently, because man, fall is here already. All gone are the days of 85 degrees, sunshine, and we are really jumping right into it, which I'm fine with. Not everybody in my family likes the transitions of the seasons as much as I do. I enjoy the fall. I can get into winter too. I can genuinely get into winter right up to Christmas. It feels like everything good about winter just all comes up to this point of Christmas, and then January and February, we got nothing. There's literally there's Valentine's Day possibly, but it's just everything builds to Christmas. And certainly for my family, we love to do a big Christmas together. We've always done it every single year. We try to make it a very special day. And one story that happened in our family, one particular Christmas, Amy, my wife, was sick. So I get up on Christmas morning and I am trying my best to execute this fun Christmas brunch that she had prepared. She's generally the cook in the family, and I just generally clean. That was my skill set. I've gotten better over time, but back then I was a complete novice in the kitchen. And so I got up and I'm this is game day. This is Christmas. You got to bring your best. And so I'm trying. And we were trying to have a fruit salad that morning, which I'm I can do fruit salad. I can do this. And I was doing really good. And then I was confronted with a pineapple. And look, I knew a couple things about pineapples, right? So I'm looking at it, I'm I know you don't eat the outside of the pineapple, right? It's basically God's fruit porcupine, right? So I'm okay, so we got to cut off the outside. So I'm doing good. I'm cutting off the spiny exterior. And then I pause for a moment and something in my mind's there's a core inside. I hear this little Jiminy Cricket voice, maybe there's something in the middle of the pineapple that I need to address, but I wasn't totally sure. My mom had joined, she comes for Christmas brunch sometimes. She was there, and so she was in the kitchen with me, and I say, hey, Mom, is there a core to this pineapple? And I don't know if she misheard me or if she was just really excited about something else, but she starts telling me the whole history of the pineapple. How they were, she just saw a documentary about how they had been grown in Hawaii, and they chose certain breeds of pineapple because the shipping cans that they were sending them were only so big, so the pineapples could be only so large. And she's just talking about pineapples, and I'm sitting there with a knife in my hand, and none of that helps me do anything with this pineapple. In that moment, I had lots of knowledge of pineapples, but I didn't have the kind of knowledge that allowed me to do something in that moment for my family. My knowledge was interesting, but it didn't make a difference in my life. And I think that difference in knowledge might be where a lot of us feel stuck in our faith right now. And knowing the difference between just knowing things about God and truly knowing God is the difference that we need if we want to connect with Christ more. So we're in a new series. Last week, Pastor introduced this series because we're going through an exciting name renewal for our church. As you can get back and listen to last week, moving forward, we're not going to be known as Covenant Community Church, if you even knew that was our name, in addition to C3, but known as Christ Community Church. And with that name change, we're updating our mission statement as well to connecting our community to Christ. And so here, as we're trying to understand this concept of connecting to Christ, Pastor Adam last week introduced an important concept that I think we want you to understand moving forward as a church, which is that if we want to truly connect with Christ, we need to understand that as followers of Jesus, we need to have an apprentice mindset when it comes to our faith. That thinking about who we are as believers, as apprentices of Jesus, is a much better way for us to frame and understand the Christian journey than some of the other maybe pictures or ideas that we have grown up with understanding in the past. Because I think a lot of us know that when you apprentice in a certain practice or a certain discipline or maybe a hobby or a work path, that involves a certain kind of knowing that just isn't book knowledge. It just doesn't mean you know a few facts and figures about things. It means that you know how to do a certain task or practice. Now, just to end my story from Christmas morning, my children, that lovely Christmas morn, ate a very crunchy fruit salad because I did not cut the core. No children were injured in the making of this fruit salad, but I didn't know what I needed to know in that moment, meaning I didn't have the skills to do what I needed to do. And if we're going to be a church that truly connects with Christ, we need to know God and not just know things about him. We need to have what we typically call street smarts instead of just book smarts. We need to know how to operate and do things in the world and not just talk about those things and tell other people how to do them. And we understand this difference in knowledge. Like, I might know a lot about singing. You may not want to hear me sing. I might know a lot about geometry and lumber, but you may not want me to build you a chair that you have to sit in. And I might know a lot about stories in the Bible, and I might even have a lot of verses memorized, but I may not be living the kind of life with my spouse and my kids and at work and when I'm all alone that you might not want to follow the way that I'm living because my knowing is only theoretical and I haven't learned to put it into practice. And that is not how we're going to connect with Christ. And so let's talk about these two different knowings today, and I'm going to try to drive it home with a single big idea. So for today, our big idea is that apprentices connect through transformation, not information. That the way that we are going to connect to Christ and the way that we're going to connect to our community is through our personal transformation, not simply knowing a bunch of information. And these two differences are really easy to confuse in terms of what does it mean to be a mature Christian. A lot of times, having information about God is often held up in churches as the high water mark of what it means to be mature. But if we want to be a people who move beyond merely wearing the makeup and the jewelry of our faith and become a people truly transformed by Christ, we need to learn the difference in these two things. But most of us are geared up to merely view information as the way that we grow. I mean, we live in the information age here in the 21st century. If, just as Pastor Adam mentioned, you hook into our church Wi-Fi, I say something that you're not sure is true, you can get on your phone and you can Google it and find out all kinds of information. There is no end to the information that is available to you. You can get on Spotify and subscribe to 1,000 different podcasts that will fill your mind with all of the odd trivialities of the world that you could ever possibly know. We tend to fill our minds with obscure and bizarre information in our culture because we're kind of attracted to just knowing stuff for the sake of knowing stuff. Like there's something in us That, you know, how you like, sometimes you like stare at a car accident, like when you're driving past, you're like, I know I shouldn't, but I can't help but look, right? That's how we are with information. We just have this bizarre craving to know certain trivial realities. And knowing stuff in that way keeps us very independent. Like we can know that stuff and people don't even know that we know it. You can get on social media and snoop on people, find out all kinds of things about them without them necessarily finding out all kinds of things for you. We like knowledge like that. Sometimes we like to read text messages over people's shoulder just to kind of like get a little understanding of who they are. If you're from my generation, if your brother or sister left their diary sitting out on the bed, you'd be like wandering in there like, oh, let's see what's going on in here. And we like gaining information like that in a way that we know things about them without having to be known. Today's modern equivalent would be like they leave their phone unlocked, and so you get in there and you read through all their messages and see what their snaps are and what kind of apps they have on their phone. In all of these ways, we view information as a way for me to have control over my environment and my world around me. Knowledge in this way becomes power for us. In fact, way back in the 1500s, Sir Francis Bacon, father of the modern scientific method, had this famous quote basically saying that knowledge was power. That knowledge, in this one way that I'm talking about, keeps me in control. It allows me to tame the world around me and bring it in and make it do the things that I desire to do. Knowledge in this way, I can learn it and I can decide to keep it, or I can decide to simply throw it away. I'm the one in control. I'm the master. I decide whether it changes me or not. But is that how God offers for us to know him? Does God offer for us to have information about him where we can simply sit back and decide whether we want to do something with it or not, or if we like it or not, and we want to pick it or not? Is that the way that God describes people who truly are growing in his knowledge? Can we know God without being known by God? Is the question we need to ask ourselves. And that debate isn't brand new. It didn't start with Sir Francis the Bacon, back in the 1500s. It was something that was very familiar to Greek philosophy. And so it was present even in the first century. So as the church was spreading around the modern Roman world in the first century, Paul, who was a church planner, had to address this understanding of knowledge because it was not compatible with what God was offering, the knowledge to connect with him. And so in one of his letters to a church in Corinth, he kind of summarizes the issue with this kind of view of knowledge. This is what he says in 1 Corinthians 8, 1-3. He says, this knowledge, meaning that very independent, I'm in control, this knowledge puffs up. It inflates our ego. But love builds up. I love this line, if anyone imagines he knows something, like, look, I know, I hold it. I'm the master of it. He does not yet know as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, he is known by God. Now, that last line always surprises me because the more logical thing for him to say is if anybody knows God, and if anybody loves God, he knows God. But Paul here, and actually in Galatians 3, does an interesting reversal where he says, instead of saying, we get to know God, he reverses the role and says, no, if anybody loves, if anybody has knowledge, his knowledge is that he is known by God. And what he's saying is that there's no objective way for us to know God. We can't stand back away from him and just study him from afar. Knowing God means bringing us into ever deepening proximity with a being who knows everything instantaneously and completely in a single moment. That every secret of our lives, every thought, every feeling, every emotion, everything, even the things that we haven't quite sorted out in our lives, God knows those things completely. He knows them from beginning to end. And there's no way to grow into knowing who God is without being confronted by that single fact that we cannot know him without being known by him. Anything less would not be knowing God. And so we have to abandon ship with Sir Francis Bacon and the scientific method's view of knowledge when it comes to God, because God cannot be placed on a slide under a microscope. He's too big to be dissected and to cut up into pieces. There's no way that knowing things about him somehow give us the upper hand in the relationship. Knowing God doesn't give us a few chips in the big game of life. None of that can be held on to if we truly want to know who God is. Knowing God cannot puff us up. It's about being stripped down and exposed and known by someone. Known by a person whose knowledge never grows. You know, God never develops knowledge. He already knows it all. Knowing him is just our ever deepening understanding of how much he already knows about who he is. And as a church who wants to connect deeper with Christ, this is the place where we can do that. You know, I think one of the most compelling reasons why the Christian story is the way for us to know God is because only in the Christian story do we have a God who is willing to lay his life down so that when we approach him and we feel sin, shame, exposed, when the dark areas of our life become unbearable, when our temptation to hide and to cover up becomes overwhelming, there the cross of Christ comes alongside of us and offers us this utterly unique ability that we can stand before God utterly uncovered, utterly exposed before his view, utterly vulnerable before him, and yet in that uncovered moment, we know that we are covered by Christ whose life stands in our place. Only when both of those realities are in our lives can we go and grow ever deeper in our understanding of who God is. And that willingness to stand there without ducking and weaving, just to be present before God, that moment, something amazing happens when we become transparent and invisible before God, without shame and without hiding. In that moment, we become transformed. That the path for us to grow in our knowledge of God is only by being willing to put ourselves out there before God and to allow that vision and God's knowing of us to actually work deep down into who we are and to change us. And that's the journey of the Christian life, of knowing God. It's this ever deepening pursuit of knowing him and being known by him and being transformed. So Peter, one of Jesus's first apprentices, writes about this in one of the letters that he wrote in 2 Peter. He talks about how the journey of the Christian faith isn't a journey of information, gathering more and more statistics on God, but it's a journey of transformation. And yet we often get these two journeys mixed up. And so to make it abundantly clear, what the apprenticeship model looks like, Peter writes this in 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 and 6. This is what he says to that church. He says, make every effort to supplement your faith. You guys know what supplements are, right? Supplement your faith with virtue, and virtue with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with steadfastness, and steadfastness with godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. For if these qualities are in you, are yours, and are increasing, they keep you from being ineffective or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus. There is an unfruitful way of knowing Jesus, a way of knowing him where our life is not showcased by these growing qualities inside it, because we're not putting the things of Jesus into practice. We're collecting facts about Jesus like people might collect facts, like baseball cards or coins or Pokemon, but none of those things are changing who we are. And so we're pursuing knowledge, but we're barking up the wrong tree of knowledge because we're not being transformed by him. And so Peter here lays out the roadmap for what the Christian life looks like. It is an ever-growing path of transformation from the inside out. And it is very easy for us to lose sight on which path is the real path to Christian maturity. It's so easy to see people who know a lot about the Bible and can quote chapter and verse, and we look at them and say, wow, look at how spiritual these people are. They know so much. But Paul says that this knowledge puffs up, and that's part of why it's so easy to actually confuse the two. Now, I don't know if Paul was thinking about a balloon when he was writing 1 Corinthians. He probably wasn't. That probably wasn't his idea. But that Greek word puff literally comes from that word to inflate. And I think he purposely chooses that particular word because it provides, I think, a very visual example of why these things are so confusing. So when you puff something up, it gives the appearance that it is solid, right? I know you know it's a balloon, right? But it has this ability to fool us, that something that was maybe a solid sphere versus this balloon have the same visual component to it. But we all know what happens to stuff that is simply puffed up, right? I think I actually hit you on that. Jesus gives an identical example at the end of his Sermon on the Mount. Adam mentioned this last time. He talks about two homes being built, and the homes look identical, right? One of them and the other look indiscernible because the difference lies in the foundation that was either dug or wasn't. And so both of them appear to be proper paths of Christian maturity. The difference is the one house put the things into practice that Jesus commands. Peter, I think, thinking through that example that Jesus ends his thought in 2 Peter chapter 1 by saying this: if you practice these qualities, you will never fall. You won't fall like the house that was built upon the sand. You won't fall when life gets difficult, and all you have is a bunch of playing cards of things that you know, but you haven't done the hard inner work of being transformed by them if you don't put the things that Jesus says into practice and make it your lifelong pursuit to add virtue to your faith. You will fall. And churches that pursue that kind of goal of Christian maturity will fall. But those who deeply want to connect to Christ by transformation, not merely information, will continue to thrive. They'll thrive as they understand that they're not only their relationship to God, but their relationship with all these spiritual disciplines that they've grown up with all their years have to be transformed. They'll take a different look at what it means to understand this book. Instead of viewing this book as like a series of Wikipedia articles or some kind of like encyclopedia of God, they start understanding that this book is more like a cookbook. You know, a cookbook you can read and you can memorize and you can learn all kinds of things about food, but unless you know how to make a meal, you don't know the purpose of what this thing is for. I remember a couple we knew when we were newlyweds. The wife one night was trying to make a lovely meal for her husband. And she got out the cookbook and she opened it up. It's the first time she had ever made garlic chicken, right? Seemed like a fairly easy recipe. She was getting it all prepared, wanted to have a big surprise when he got home. Well, unfortunately, she didn't know the difference between a bulb of garlic and a clove of garlic. And if you know the difference between a bulb of garlic and a clove of garlic, you know that when the recipe called for 6 bulbs of garlic, and she chopped up, count them, 6 bulbs of garlic and put it in the chicken, she served up some garlicky chicken. Werewolves were dying for 100 miles radius around this house. Where they were just dying left and right. Now look, after cooking that meal, she knew, like it ain't no theoretical knowledge at that point. She knew the difference between a bulb of garlic and a clove of garlic from that point forward. C3, look, we need to learn how to cut the pineapple, people. We need to learn how to cut the pineapple if we're going to truly connect to Christ, us personally, okay? We have that? Okay, so we need to know that we connect to Christ through transformation and not information. And just real quick, we're going to do how do we connect to our community through transformation and not information, right? We have to know it for ourselves, this community here, and we need to know it in order to connect to our community out there as well. Because I'm just going to tell you this, and this is where, this is the part of the sermon where you'll get offended. The world out there, they don't care how much you know. I'm sorry. They don't care how much you think you know right now. So they don't need your opinion. They're not looking for another Christian meme from you. They're not even looking for like a real snappy bumper sticker. They do not care about what you think you know. This generation that we are growing up with is deeply skeptical. They've grown up in an era of fake news and deep fakes. I mean, there is a whole TikTok channel, don't look at it right now, I don't care if you're on the Wi-Fi, called @deeptomcruise.com, or not .com, this is how much I know about TikTok, Deep Tom Cruise, which is a series of videos that a gentleman put together where through the use of artificial intelligence, he superimposed Tom Cruise's face and voice over his own, and he's got all these, and you cannot tell the difference with these videos. You cannot tell the difference. We are trying to reach a generation that grew up with Photoshop, and so nothing short of genuine inside-out transformation is going to connect to this generation. None of it. Nothing else will work. There are no more Christian shortcuts to reaching the next generation. I'm sorry, hip music and lighting and cool paint jobs will not work. Snazzy programs and options, even casual attire, will not work. Now, all of those things have their place in helping make our faith comprehensible to the next generation, but if they become a substitute for the substance, then we no longer have anything to offer to them. All we're putting out to them is the whitewash paint job of making the veneer look better when we haven't worked hard to transform the heart. And even if those things would work, they will not help this generation live in a confusing world. We have to be connected to Christ if we're going to offer help to any of them out there who are desiring to be connected to Christ. Jesus saw this. In the first century, there was a group there that made the high water mark of maturity, knowing things about God without truly knowing God. We talk about them a lot. They're called the Pharisees. And Jesus famously calls them whitewashed tombs because it was all about the externals. It was all about the outside, and the inside was a dead and desert place. And so when the Pharisees were trying to connect to their community, they weren't trying to connect them to Christ, but they were trying to connect to the community. Jesus looks at them and their untransformed hearts and says, your desire to connect with your community will do them no good. This is what he says in Matthew 23. He says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert," right? They were trying to connect to the community, but when you succeed, you make them twice a child of hell that you are, meaning you're going to hell with your whitewashed faith. And now that these people are connecting to you and your emaciated view of what knowing God is, now they're on the same path that you are. Unless we are deeply connecting to Christ, we shouldn't be connecting to our community. We do them no good except make them twice as bad as we are, because they see our hypocrisy and then they just take it to the next level. Now, speaking of hell, as we have here, I'm sure a lot of you have seen signs like this on the highways, and as a way to connect, right? This is a way for people to try to connect, I guess, their community to Christ. And undoubtedly, you've had similar mixed feelings, that I have about what's being portrayed by this message. But again, this is the offensive part of the message. I'll go out on a limb here and say there's something deeply wrong with these signs. I mean, I read this and I just wonder, if it was this simple, to connect our community to Christ, Jesus could have saved a trip. like he didn't have to come all the way down from heaven if he just needed to connect our community to Christ with 7 simple words. I mean, even the old Twitter gives you more characters than 7. I mean, this is super simple, but that's not the way he came. He didn't come to drop a truth bomb and fly back to heaven. He came to live with people and show them how to be transformed and to give them a message to share of that transformation, which inevitably takes us to one of those places. But we can't boil our faith down to a simple choice like this, where all you have to do is agree with a few facts and, man, your ticket is punched and you are on the way. Now, I don't want to be outdone by Pastor Adam. Last week he had 3 Dallas Willard quotes, and that was a serious challenge. So I want to include one here that relates to this issue and see how it all connects together. This is what Dallas Willard says about this issue. He says this: "Now I must say something you can be mad at me about." See, I told you this was the offensive part. "A fundamental mistake of the conservative side of the American church today, and much of the Western church, is that it takes as its basic goal to get as many people as possible ready to die and to go to heaven. It aims to get people into heaven rather than to get heaven into people. Now, did he accomplish his mission? Did that quote make you mad? Did it rub you the wrong way? Good. I mean, I don't mean that in like a snarky, I like to confuse you kind of way, but good. I mean, it's good to be challenged. It's good to show up somewhere that confronts the way that we're thinking about things. You know, one of the ways that you can know whether your view of the Christian faith is a pursuit of information versus transformation is that you just want to go to a place that Sunday after Sunday basically feeds the things that you already believe, helps you live more deeply in confirmation bias, and you leave that place thinking, man, I like being so right. But there's a difference between a place that will make you feel right and a place that will teach you how to live right. And that challenge to our thinking and our understanding of how we are to pursue God is the only way that we will live differently and live transformed and change if we're willing to face it and to be grown by it. What if we realized if the best way for us to connect our community to Christ was to make sure that we were connected to him? What if we realized that at the end of the day, more people would want to go to our heaven if they saw something compelling within the people who were claiming to go there? There is something that we need to understand here, that only through becoming apprentices of Jesus, trying to bring more heaven into our lives, will we truly be connecting to him and to our community. So how can we do that practically? We always try to give you a few next steps that will enable you throughout this week to maneuver in these spaces. Two things I'm calling you to this morning. First off, I quoted 2 Peter chapter 1. An easy goal this week would be simply lay open that chapter and the verses that I read and just slowly read through those things. Slowly reading through the way that Peter describes the Christian life and ask yourself, am I in this process of adding virtues, supplementing virtues to my faith? Do I see my life as a progress of growing in this area or not? If you have more time than that, I think the whole book of 1 Peter is a great way to see how he saw the faith of the early church blossoming in a time of persecution and difficulty, as he continually throughout that book of 1 Peter calls them to deepen their understanding of how Christ wants to transform them. So that is a good challenge this week. Second one, and this goes back to the Wikipedia versus cookbook concept here. As you are reading these things, or however you are exposing yourself to Scripture in order to be transformed by it, pause after reading it and allow yourself to be known by God through what you have read. You know, I don't think you're going to necessarily hear an audible voice by God. I'm not claiming that, but it is a little shocking that as Christians, we spend all our time talking to God and we never pause to say, is this true about me? How am I not living this? Search me, O God, and know my heart. Let me know if there's any wicked way in me. And we just pause and say, who am I in relation to this good word? Help me be transformed by it. So Jesus didn't come down and change the world by writing a bestseller. He didn't come to to drop a truth bomb. He didn't come down from heaven and sit down in front of a typewriter and bang out, his epic saga. He came down and collected 12 individuals and lived with them. Instead of just offering them information, he put them on a path of transformation as he, day after day, lived with them, slept with them, ate with them, wept with them, bled with them. And then after the end, after he showed them how to live and laid his life down to let them know that this path of transformation, though it is scary to be naked and exposed by an all-knowing God, is genuinely safe for them because of what he has done for them on the cross. After he died and was raised, showing that the forces of darkness and the shadows within us will never have the final answer. They will never overcome us. We will always live in the new life that Jesus is offering as we pursue him. He turns to those folks that he had apprenticed through those years, and he says, "Go therefore and make apprentices, teaching them to do everything that I have commanded you." And so Jesus sets this trajectory for his church. He lays this line out for the future of his church to follow. And I'm just asking, as we change our name to Christ Community Church, are we going to stand in the same lane that Jesus stood in? Are we going to listen to the mandate from our master and truly become Christ Community Church? Are we going to say to him, "Lord, Lord," and not do the things that he commanded us to do? Or will we learn this simple lesson that we cannot connect to Christ and we cannot connect to our community with information? It's only going to happen through inner transformation. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the opportunity just to stand in this space, just to pause and to look at ourselves and ask, is it I, Lord? Am I the one who has made this mistake? Am I puffed up? Have I given my heart over to a safe place where I am invulnerable to you because I have doubts, I am afraid, and I refuse to move forward? And if that's who we are, and we all are, help us by the power of your Spirit to take a step forward, to embrace what the cross truly offers to us, and to stand before your marvelous face and live a life there. We pray this in Jesus' name.